We all know we should exercise more, that we should drink more water, and that we should eat healthy food. But when it comes to going out to eat at a restaurant, how do you handle those needs and responsibility to our own body? We're going to talk about that next here on Better Life Today. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Better Life Today, Blue Zones Project. Today in the studio, I have John Dimof. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're with the Roseburg effort? What do we call it? Roseburg?
We call it a project, specifically the Blue Zones Project. And because we are focusing on a broad area, geographic area, we actually chose the word Umpqua, which a lot of people identify with in a bigger sense. Umpqua Valley, Umpqua River, Umpqua region. So we call it
ice cream.
Yes, Umpqua Ice Cream, Umpqua Bank, Umpqua Community College. So Blue Zones Project Umpqua is who I work for. I am the organization lead for that project.
Organization lead. No, so what does that mean?
What it means is I get the privilege to meet with wonderful business leaders focusing on how to help the community. I help assist them in adopting well-being practices around lifestyle, healthy options, and basically trying to incorporate well-being into their businesses.
Mm-hmm. So you're encouraging them to maybe step up to the plate a little bit and think about...
So to speak.
Okay.
Pun intended, I'm sure, with this guy. But yes, what can we do as far as getting healthier options on our plate? That's a no-brainer. That's a major aspect of the project.
Sure. And we were talking a little bit ago before the program that you're dealing with schools, their cafeterias, with hospitals, and institutions like that. But when it comes to going out to eat in a restaurant, now I go out to eat, and I think I mentioned this, when I go out to eat, I'm not always thinking about healthy options. A lot of times there aren't healthy options. But I'm thinking about the fettuccine alfredo that I'm going to treat myself to. That's probably not good for me, or the mazzithra spaghetti, or some Mexican cuisine. I am vegetarian, but when I don't go out to eat very often. But there's a reason I go out to eat, and it's usually, unless I'm traveling, not because I'm hungry.
Yeah. Well, you, like most people, have a priority, and that is taste. We all want to eat tasty food, and there's no problem with that whatsoever. That's human nature. We have an attraction to eat something that we think is fulfilling, and oftentimes taste, in the science sense, relates to calorie intake. Mm-hmm. And so we know that calories are needed, and we know that taste, in its original sense, was meant to guide us to a sufficient amount of calories. So taste is essential in a number of aspects. But when it comes to enjoying our meal, we got to have taste. Mm-hmm. And so that is, I would say, a myth that at having healthier options are sometimes not as tasty. They can be tasty with training and the right perspective.
Okay, and so what's the challenge there? Because I know how to bake fettuccine alfredo, and if it's got a lot of fat in it, then I'm good to go.
Right? Exactly.
So the challenge, where do we find the challenge in getting the restaurant owners who are business people? That's very different than to me than a hospital cafeteria, mm-hmm. who's got a different what's the word I want, a different agenda than to just make food to sell. Mm-hmm. They're catering to a need that the hospital has.
How to make it attractive, how to make it a nice experience for people. Right. Yeah, there's wonderful examples we're seeing now of restaurants that are taking different food ingredients and making them taste in a way that we are familiar with, that kind of hits our senses and hits our palate in a way that says, yeah, this was fulfilling, this was nourishing, this was enjoyable. And so a lot of tweaks, a lot of small things can be done in the restaurant field to do that, mm-hmm. but not many people were trained in that. I mean, going back 10, 15 years, a lot of mainstream cooks, a lot of mainstream chefs were trained in a manner that's a little different than what we're now trying to incorporate. Maybe looking at how to incorporate more nuts and seeds and healthy fats into their repertoire, how to incorporate taste without maybe the amount of calories. Sometimes calories are overconsumed, and we know that's a big factor in our society today.
Right.
Too many calories and not enough nutrients.
Okay.
And so there's actually a phrase for that. It's called nutrient density, and it's an emerging topic in the restaurant field and in the food world about how to supply people with more taste and nutrients and not as much calories.
Okay. I know here in North America, when I go out to eat, especially breakfast, it seems like the plate is twice as big as any plate I have at home. And the food is just piled up, and it's just an enormous amount of food. You know?
Yeah, and bigger is not always better.
Right.
We live in this kind of supersized society where we're scouring. Scarcity is a real thing. We're looking for how to get the most amount of things.
Right.
But excess is now more of a problem than scarcity.
Right.
Scarcity is no longer an issue so much in our culture as much as overabundance and not being able to be responsible with what options and what choices are available in that kind of environment.
Well, and I have to admit, I don't enjoy. I enjoy the foods that I go out to eat, but I don't enjoy leaving the restaurant feeling overly full.
Right.
Even though that's what they serve you. And my wife and I just found a little Mexican restaurant we like that actually serves smaller portions, and we leave feeling not full and not hungry. And it's like, well, we love this place, and the prices are a little bit less, which is kind of nice.
And that's the balance, I think, that nobody wants to leave a place feeling like, I didn't get enough. Especially if the cost isn't in proportion to that, right?
Exactly.
But there is a happy medium there. And in some cultures, in one of the blue zones, longevity hotspots, they had a word for that. They called it hari-hachi-bu. Hari-hachi-bu loosely translates to eating till you're 80% full. And that narrow window there is that window where we know you get the satisfaction, but you're not over-consuming calories.
Sure.
And when we know there's too many calories to burn, our body has to go into a mode where we stop thinking and moving, and we want to sit on a couch and kind of like just go to sleep and try to digest that food. We've all been there. And that's the phenomenon where it's kind of a sign where we know, oh yeah, maybe I went past that hari-hachi-bu.
Well, I don't know about you, but I was not born with a meter to tell me when that 80% happened. So,
Yeah, well, it's believe it or yeah, and we have to redevelop that. Some of these things are trained over time, and but acknowledging it is interesting. Imagine sitting to eat and you got a reminder about that. Hari-hachi-bu instead of salut or bon appetit. This kind of just gentle acknowledgement meant to help us understand to be a little more mindful when we're eating, that we're not just eating for the sake of indulgence. We're not just eating just for pure pleasure, but we're eating to have a better life. Yeah, we're not living to eat, we're eating to live.
right. Now, for me, when I go out to eat locally, it's more of a social event than it is that I have this big desire to go out and eat food, unless I'm just being lazy. You know, it's a little different than traveling. So there's that social aspect, that developing relationships.
Right.
We have some friends that it is our habit to take each other out on their birthdays to have a meal. And that's fun, and we enjoy that, and it's establishing that bond of friendship. Now, you mentioned one word that I want you to clarify, which was hotspot. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, thank you. So many of us have heard about the blue zones, and those are longevity hotspots. Those are places where we know there are more centenarians, there are more long-lived people per capita than in other places in the world.
Okay.
And so in fact, we know that people are reaching 90 and 100 in these blue zones hotspots, or these longevity hotspots, as much as 10 times as in America. So this is significant, and this is what the body of research that we are implementing as far as the Blue Zones Project, this is where it comes from through Dan Buettner and the team that went around the world and discovered these areas of incredible longevity.
Right, and then here in North America, Loma Linda, California is the one.
Loma Linda,
that
California
really
is a wonderful example, large concentration of Seventh-day Adventists in their tenets, in the suggestions in the culture there, focusing on well-being practices that researchers love to look at, because you can actually quantify the advantages, the health benefits of living a lifestyle around those tenets.
Right, and I grew up there, or large portion of my growing up was there. And I can tell you that the lifestyle, the longevity is not because it's got clean air. So.
Right. Yeah. There isn't some zone there in California where
it's fresh air.
Yes.
And so you use that. There's 5 longevity hotspots, you said, and then there's another word that's coming up, which is called Power 9. And refresh our mind on that. I know Juliet talked about it at one time. I don't remember what it meant.
When the researchers went around the planet to look at these places where they were finding incredible longevity statistics, they had to map out and look and see not only the zone or the geographic area where this was taking place, but also try to figure out why. And the premise was that it's not solely genetics that are responsible for that. We know that at most, depending upon the studies you look at most genetics are responsible for about 20% of our health and longevity. And so that leaves the lion's share, this larger portion, which we can say is about 70% on environment and lifestyle. So the question is, what is that lifestyle that is present in the longest lived cultures? And what can we learn from that? And that's what Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones Project team went out to discover was, can we map that out? Can we identify the overlapping principles in all of those longevity hotspots that could guide us to techniques, best practices that we know would lead to a longer life? And that's where affectionately we call it the Power 9. These are the 9 things that they found overlapping in these places that can lead to greater lengths of longevity.
Oh, okay. And on my list here, there's one other word that we use is life radius.
Life radius.
What is that?
It is the area that we spend the majority of our time in. So a lot of us spend our time around where we live and around where we work. You put that together, you have a life radius. An area where we're interacting with our community and our environment, where we're going shopping, where we're eating, where we're spending our time. And that life radius, we now know, has a major contribution to our health and our happiness. And so this is one of the main ways we know we can help each other is through having a life radius that is conducive to our health.
Okay. So my wife and I, when we sold our home up on the mountain, we had been praying that we would find a home that was close to work, close to church, or close to the in-laws, and we got a place right in a triangle to that, almost the same, that worked really well for us. And so we're like 10 minutes to work and 5 minutes to church and 7 minutes to the in-laws. And so that's our life radius. We chose that not knowing the word.
Yes.
That's where our life works.
Life triangle, however you want to call it.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk more about restaurants, how many people in the world go out to eat, and all of those sorts of things. So, folks, stay tuned. You won't want to miss the next part as we really delve into this idea of healthy restaurant eating. Hi, and welcome back to this episode of Better Life Today Blue Zones Project. Today in the studio, we've been having an engaging conversation with John Dimof. I said it just a little bit wrong, but I got it right then. And we've been talking about the food industry, the institutional and restaurant, I guess that's an institution of a type as well, food industry. And I want to, before we talk about the restaurants and get deeper into that, let's talk about your history and what brought you to Blue Zones and what you've observed with your, sounds like pretty much a lifetime of interest in foods and in health.
Thank you. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be surrounded by an environment which you say is the commercial or institutional food world. My father was a master chef, had many restaurants, worked in hotels, and always involved in food in some shape or form. So growing up in that environment, I became to get a better understanding of how powerful it is to serve a community in terms of food and what an integral place food has in a culture. And it wasn't until I was a teenager and I got to travel to where my father grew up. My father grew up in a small village on the northeast coast of Greece. and the town was called Kavala, and it was absent of the tourist involvement that happens in many other countries. So what I noticed visiting there as a teenager was that there weren't fast food restaurants. There really wasn't anything I could recognize as something being of Western culture, American culture. That was a little awkward for me as a teenager. I got used to it and started looking at what options people ate there. And what I noticed was that they ate a lot of beans and a lot of greens. And I ate that too, of course, wanting to adopt that culture. A lot of greens, a lot of beans, and they were very tasty. A lot of sauces, a lot of spices. There was some fish, but I always noticed on every plate, on every dish, there was some beans and some greens. I was too young to understand the significance of that, but I did see that people seemed to have a glow about them. People were thin, they were walking a lot, they seemed very healthy to me. Years later, it finally occurred to me that there was some relationship between how these people were living and how healthy they were. Later on, I began to study medicine, I began to study lifestyle, and then I found that there is legitimate science showing us that there are connections between how we live, the food we eat, and how healthy we are. And that eventually led me to learn about the blue zones, the research of the longest lived people. And I got involved right away, seeing that we actually have a plan. We have a plan on how we can learn from these cultures and actually impact our communities and serve them with options that we know will lead to better health and longevity.
Right. And what I think is wonderful is the information that you have and the plan that you have has not been for personal fulfillment exclusively. That anytime that you see an organization say, I want to teach people how to do that, that tells you about their heart. That they want to better their community, to better the people that they're involved with, their relationships and everything. And that's a selfless act.
Service, I think, for me is a major component in wanting to help people, and understanding that people really can only help others if they're willing to help themselves. And I think that's one of the beauties of looking at a project like this, is that we're trying to figure out how people can help themselves. And we know people will make choices on their own, but they'll make the choice that's better for them only if that choice is available.
Right.
And so how can we support our community, our environments in a way to where there are those choices, to where people have to help themselves by making a better choice. And if we can make that healthier choice easier, then we've succeeded. And maybe not necessarily teaching or in a negative sense, forcing someone to do something, but by allowing them the opportunity to learn and grow themselves.
Sure. It's pretty tough to tell anybody what to do.
Absolutely.
You know?
We've all made that mistake.
And so with the food institutions that you work with, I would think that the more challenging one, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be in the restaurant segment. Who all goes out to eat?
Yeah. Who all goes out to eat? Yeah. So many people are going out to eat. Sometimes they don't have enough time. You know, sometimes they're specifically focused on having a nice social engagement, as you shared with us. Yeah, we're not necessarily thinking we're going out to eat because I want to be taught about health. Yeah,
right.
But this is a perfect example of how our institutions, our commercial food institutions, and our environment can in a way passively support us in having a healthier option so easily available that we don't necessarily have to struggle with it. We can go to these establishments to enjoy or because of convenience and still have the healthier option available to us. Convenience is essential, enjoyment is essential, and cost is also a critical component. You put all three of those together, and then you have a strategy for how we can help a community. Keeping the costs down, keeping it convenient, and making it enjoyable. And all those things are possible to do on a, I would say, plant-forward or plant-based approach where we help people consume more nutrients, less calories through a plant-based options.
And the presentation's important. When I kind of tend to avoid the little things on the menu that have a little heart next to it when I have breakfast, because when you get the heart-friendly omelet, it's served looking very anemic,
Right.
kind of flat and unattractive. It may taste fine, but it just doesn't.
And this is the misunderstanding we have to change, is that healthy, whether you call it heart healthy or anything healthy, has to be bland, has to be flat, has to be tasteless. It could be so enjoyable, it can be so tasty, it could be just as fulfilling with a little help, with a little training, and a little willingness and openness to make adjustments in menus. So, but we need the cooperation of our cooks and our food establishments, which is one of the topics we're looking at here today, is what does that look like? How can our institutions actually serve our community better by making some of those changes? Not just to healthier options, but also to tastier options too.
Right. Well, I'll share one quick story. Is my mom, I grew up around Loma Linda, and my mom owned a restaurant there, which was a vegetarian restaurant. She never billed it as a vegetarian restaurant. The food was wonderful. Many people came, didn't even realize it was vegetarian, but they came over and over and over again because the food was good. It wasn't, we are billing it as this so that we would put you off. We're just saying that it tastes great, and here's the food, and they would have people at lunch lined up outside just waiting for a table.
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear what they shouldn't do. Right. Nobody wants to hear what's not right. We want to hear positive things, and I think that's totally possible in a plant-based approach. Is how can we address that concern that people have, because we know that there are some issues that we're struggling with in terms of overconsumption of calories. Obesity is an epidemic in our culture. Overconsumption of added sugars is an epidemic, and we can see the health consequences of that. So how can we provide the satisfaction that those ingredients have, but having less consumption of them and replacing them with healthier options? And so this is an exciting time because we're seeing more than ever options available for people that are readily in our marketplace, but don't necessarily have the name sugar-free or fat-free. That isn't really the criteria for better health. It's actually having less amounts of these, but having it be tastier at the same time.
Right. So stop labeling it and start serving it better.
Yep.
Right. So do you find it a challenge, and how do you overcome this challenge to get, because watching my mom run a restaurant, restaurant owners are busy. That's the hardest work on the planet, I'm sure. To get them to sit down and have the discussion.
Yeah. When people would ask me, John, are you going to take over your father's restaurants? Because he had quite a few restaurants. In my mind at the time, I always heard this resounding no. And it wasn't because the business wasn't a fulfilling business. It was because it's so busy. It's so consuming for someone who operates a restaurant on that scale that you feel like you've got a second wife. You're married to that. It's a big responsibility. So I really respect people who endeavor to work that hard to provide an establishment like that. And I think the payoff is you see the satisfaction. It is a service. It's a service industry. Part of the challenge is the time. Restaurants are often very busy environments, and there aren't always networks where people can meet together to compare and look at how to serve the community healthier options. So that's a challenge. When we look at forming coalitions of restaurants in terms of how to better serve the community, we find that getting people to sit together and getting people to collaborate is a major challenge. But luckily, we've been able to do that through wonderful local leaders who are really willing to step aside from their busy schedules and look at how to make this work in a positive manner in the community.
Preventative strategies is on our list here to talk about. And so when you get these people to the table, I'm sure that's part of the discussion. And so what are some of the preventative strategies that you would discuss with a restaurant?
So there's many strategies. So we've been able to document what we call evidence-based best practices that are inspired by the longest lived cultures. And I think that's something that I feel very lucky and excited about, is that as we talked about these cultures, a little bit of your background and a little bit of my time in Greece, we know that the longest lived cultures are making certain choices. Now, when we transfer that to really practical strategies for any restaurant, for any food establishment, what does that look like? And so these are, as you say, preventative strategies. These are the things that we know should work if implemented properly. So there's a whole menu of these things that are there, and some of them require very small efforts, and some of them require a little greater efforts. Some of them are almost invisible and part of the environment, and some of them are more available and visible. And so there's a spectrum. And so we encourage restaurants or any establishment to look at doing these kinds of slight passive environmental options, and then see as time goes on if they would like to do more. Now, I'll give you some examples of that. An idea that a restaurant could adopt is maybe highlighting a certain option on their menu that is of a healthier variety. Yeah. Now you'd say that's marketing, that's kind of advertising, that's kind of in the middle. Yeah. On the more effort side of the spectrum, it might be that they actually charge more for an unhealthier option, charge less for a healthier option.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's different ways that this could be looked at. And one option that many restaurants take is simply to have a different side of a dish. So maybe there's a traditional side that is only French fries. Maybe there's a side that could be looked at of a healthier option like salad.
Right. Oh, wonderful. We could talk for another hour, I'm sure, but we're out of time now, but we're going to come back for our next part 2 of this discussion in our next episode. So thanks for joining us, folks. Keep watching the Blue Zones, Better Life Today Blue Zones Project, and have a wonderful day. God bless.